Good afternoon. Welcome back. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm not sure what exactly happened upstairs to get you down here in a matter of like 60 seconds, but whoever was responsible for that, I don't know if that was Bernie. Oh, my microphone just fell out again, but okay. All right. We'll just make it work. On with the show is my motto. I'm Heather Staines. I'm a senior consultant at DeltaThink, and I'm so excited to be back in person here. I was here in 2017 in Lisbon, and it's one of my fondest conference memories, although I look back at the videos and clearly I had like the bubonic plague or something and should never have been here. But we've got a wonderful panel and discussion for you next. I'm going to introduce the speakers. There's a few slides that I have to present as well. But I just want to say I'm so happy we didn't have to follow Agata's panel directly because it was so beautifully presented and themed that we needed a little bit of a palate cleanser in between. So way to go, Agata. Put her later in the program next time. I think you'll find that just from the brief number of sessions presented already, there are themes that are going to follow through from our panel, which is show the money, open access. We'll get to the next one here. That's not showing. Show me the money, not show the money. Decoupling OA from per publication charges. I mentioned the themes that have will come through. We heard from Joy Oengo to change the narrative, which our speakers will be talking about today. And we heard Vanessa as well talk about bringing a number of stakeholder voices to the table and unusual stakeholders that you might not normally hear from. In our keynote earlier, from Dr. Liao, we heard about the importance of multilingual use cases, which Reggie will be bringing in, and I think you'll find it's a wonderful continuation. For those of us who were in Manchester in the UK last week, also at ALPS, you'll have noticed the themes that we started to talk about there, continuing on, and I think it's just a wonderful timing to have the two conferences together. So as I mentioned, I'm going to introduce all of the speakers first, and then I have a few slides. And I just want to tell you now, and I will tell you again later, after this session, there is no break. You just had your break. I hope you braked it up. We have a 5-minute transition before we get our final speaker of the day on. So do not do what you did in the last 5-minute transition, which is like wander off for 15 minutes. Every minute that you're away will be deducted from the reception tonight. And I kid you not. So after I do a few slides, our first speaker will be Christina Lembrecht. Christina has been responsible for open research strategy at De Gruyter, now De Gruyter-Brill, since 2021. She's played a key role in shaping the publisher's journal transformation strategy and orchestrating the launch of De Gruyter's Subscribe to Open program, which she'll be speaking about. Prior to her current role, she spent nearly a decade in various positions in the humanities department. And as a historian, I just love that. She's been deeply involved in the open access community for many years, particularly in that space. With an academic background in book history, again, yay, Christina earned a PhD with a focus on UNESCO's book policies in the 1960s or 70s, so test her later at the reception. And she examined how to enhance the global circulation and accessibility of books. Her career also includes experience at the International Guadalajara Book Fair, the largest Spanish-language book fair in the world. And it was during her time in Mexico she first began exploring issues related to global accessibility of literature and knowledge, a passion that continues to drive her work today. Our second speaker, immediately to Christina's right, is Catherine Mitchell. Catherine's responsible for overseeing the strategic planning, development, and operational management of CDL, California Digital Libraries, Publishing, Archives, and Digitization Program. This provides the research community with innovative open access publishing and distribution solutions and aggregates world-class digital collections from libraries, archives, and museums throughout the state of California. And she serves, through that role, a variety of different end users, from researchers to scholars to students, as well as the general public. The program services there at CDL include e-scholarship, which we'll hear about. That's their open access repository and publishing platform. Calisphere, which is an open gateway to over 1 million digitized historical images, texts, and recordings, and the Google Books HathiTrust projects. Catherine is also operations director of their Office of Scholarly Communications, and in this capacity is particularly engaged in questions of use, value, authorship, and professional legitimacy. She also serves on the executive committee as secretary to the OASPA board. And our third speaker is Dr. Reggie Raju. Reggie is Director, Research and Learning Services at the University of Cape Town Libraries. Sorry, not enough coffee yet, or maybe too much. He has been in academic libraries for more than 35 years. He's the author of more than 85 publications in peer-reviewed national and international journals, as well as book chapters and a book publication. His focus is on research librarianship and an emphasis on open access and library publishing. He's delivered a number of keynote addresses on the issue of open publishing. He's currently the chair of Spark Africa and is driving the social justice agenda of open access for Africa. He also serves on international boards such as OBC in the UK and Redalic America in Mexico. He served on the editorial board of the Journal of Librarianship and Scholarly Communication and also South African Journal of Libraries and Information Sciences. So we were going to do like a little show of hands for stakeholders, but again, Agata, don't let her go before you. But I would like to just ask you a couple questions. We're not going to do Mentimeter, but from the publishers that we have in the room, I'm curious who would say they are mainly editorial in function? Not that many, or you're just shy, or you're still eating your cookie. How about marketing? See a few hands. Sales. Really interesting. Production. I don't know whether technology, multiple departments. You literally do everything. I knew there were some of them hiding there. And then I wanted to ask this question, since we only had two choices on the previous slide. Who is from the Western Hemisphere? And who's from the Eastern Hemisphere? So we also have some work to do, Eastern versus Western. And then finally, humanities, social science people. And if you've done both, you can raise your hands for both. Good representation there. And STEM, or STEAM, or STEM, whatever. Okay, it's hard to keep track on that. Okay, so we know who our audience is in the room. All right, so the topic of this panel is non-APC publishing, but we did want to set the stage just a little bit, and I lied when I said I could see the slides over there, because they're still pretty tiny. Oh, I should have put that up. Yeah, pretend you saw it already. So as I mentioned, I'm a senior consultant with DeltaThink, and we do, every month we put out a little newsletter where we look at some aspect of the publications market. It could be OA, it could be strategy, could be something else. And we've done a couple of things recently that I thought were pretty relevant, to this particular panel, just to set the stage. So while we are primarily interested in this panel in non-APC funded models, there's been a lot of emphasis lately on affordability around the globe. So what you see here is a heat map, which looks at places where in the US dollar's currency exchange rate, things tend to be more affordable, stronger purchasing power versus places where it's less affordable. And the thing to really notice here is just the middle ground. Middle ground is really quite extensive, and the majority of countries that don't qualify, for many of the reduced and free waiver programs are in this vital, middle ground. So we recently looked at purchasing power parity, and I don't expect you to be, read all this, but go look at our news and views, where my colleague Dan Pollock, who's somewhere in the room, looked at, who's over here, Lori Carlin helpfully pointed him out. So thank you for that, Lori. And the economists back in the 80s developed what they called the Big Mac Index, or Burgernomics, to try to look at taking one commodity that's available, largely around the world, and looking at the prices. And we've found, what was found as a result of that, and what has been found in recent updates, is it's not just a direct, comparison. You can't just change your pricing, to what that currency would look like in the countries. If we had more salespeople in the room, they'd be the first ones to kind of point that out to you. And you would need to make adjustments. The purchasing power is not strong in most countries. Now, I will just say I was not familiar with this type of chart. But now I am. And so if you look at this chart, and it's a couple of different metrics, we've got North America, EU, 2 Research for Life categories, as well as high, middle, and low, according to the World Bank. And what happens when you look at here is that most countries have a lower purchasing power parity than you would expect. The one I just drew attention to with Brazil, if we were to just do a currency conversion, you would need to discount 50% to reflect what the actual purchasing power, in Brazil is when it comes to that. And the middle quartiles, remember I mentioned that middle ground, you'd have to discount almost all of them. And what you would have after you did all that discounting to make it affordable is a 34% drop in your market value. And I don't think very many of us could report that up the line without having some kind of impact. So to then adjust and have the wealthier areas of the world compensate for the reductions for the places that have less purchasing power, you would need to up the prices for those other areas. And so like throwing one rock in the water causes a bunch of ripples, but once you add like another rock, then you've got a lot of complexity going on. So I know there's some publishers now, I've done some research where they're experimenting with tiered pricing for APCs. It's a lot more complicated than you might think. Just the last thing that I wanted to draw your attention to before we get to our speakers is a little update that we did earlier this year on the share of journals without APCs. So these might be called diamond, they might also be called sponsored journals. One of the challenges, as we all know, is the definitions are not that specific and they're changing all the time. So what you see here in the gray, well, let me start with, the gray is the pay to publish journals that charge APCs, and then the remaining portions show journals that don't charge APCs. Sorry, I'm getting confused now. You can read it. I really need more coffee. And so what's important to note here is when you look at the data, it's very hard to identify these journals. So what we did is we looked at journals that had not been charging APCs for 3 years or longer. We thought that 3 years was a good benchmark for to get those introductory offers off the table, so you'd be able to kind of put those out. But you can see that the share of journals that don't charge APCs has actually been dropping over the past few years, from 26% in 2021 to just under 20% in 2024. The picture's a little bit different when you put in society journals, and this is my last slide, I promise. Society journals, which are on the right-hand side there, do tend to utilize non-APC models or sponsored models, if that's your term of art, at a much higher level than non-society journals, regardless of whether they work with a partner or whether they're self-published. So, but their share is also reducing over time from 2021 down to 2024, reducing by about 10%. So we are keeping an eye on what's happening there with all of this interest in non-APC funded models, and we'll make sure that we bring you those updates accordingly. And find us during the break and find Dan, because he played with the data, and since his time difference is less than mine, he's probably a lot more coherent than I am at this point. And with that, you can find me. I will hand over to Christina and try to get my microphone back on.
Hello, good afternoon. Obrigada, Heather, for the introduction and also for setting the screen. And thank you to OASPA and its program committee to inviting me to this panel to reflect on how to make non-APC models sustainable in the long run, and by also looking at the Gruyter's Subscribe to Open initiatives. In this short presentation today, I would like to focus on one question: what does it take to scale? And I would like to approach this question from two different angles. from an operational and organizational point of view, and from the perspective of long-term financial sustainability. But before I get to this, I would like to provide a brief overview of our transformation strategy and the rationale behind it. So what's the plan? Approximately 3 years ago, we started to look into how we can transition our journal portfolio to open access. And we set ourselves some objectives. So we wanted to have an adequate OA solution in place for our HSS journals that make up a considerable amount of our overall journal portfolio. We wanted to allow all our authors to publish open access, regardless of their institutional affiliation or their financial situation. And we wanted to accelerate the open access transformation, making open access a reality in a short to medium perspective, and not for something which is in the distant, undefined future. And by this, we really wanted to have a clear direction of travel for all stakeholders, being them internal as well as external. At that time, we started to look into this. We were able to draw on some experiences of the past. So back in 2013, we launched our first sponsored Diamond journal, and we currently have around 35 journals operating in that model, mainly in HSS disciplines. Then 2 years later, we flipped the first STEM subscription titles to fully gold open access, and that was the foundation of our mainly STEM Gold APC portfolio. And then, just like many other publishers, we started to work on transformative agreements back in 2018, 2019. And we were able to grow them quite successfully, I would say, to have now agreements in 25 countries in place with 750 institutions participating. So even we were growing this part, the transformational impact is still quite low, and you can see that above. So we currently have at least 300 hybrid journals and OA share of around a little bit more than 10%. And then in 2021, we started with a Subscribe to Open pilot, mainly in the German environment for our HSS journals. So we were living and have been living and will be living in what we call a mixed model reality. And the focus of the strategy development really was on the 300 hybrid journals and what we could do for them. So we were looking at the challenges that we are facing in transitioning this portfolio into open access. And this is really a very brief overview of the analysis we did. And basically, we distinguished 3 different, let's say, categories of challenges. So one really lies in our portfolio structure. We have what we call a mismatch between where our authors come from and where we have subscription in place. Our subscription business is still quite reliant on print, especially in HSS, and on single subscription. So on our consortia business, the portion of our consortia business is relatively small. And then, already mentioned, we have a large portion of HSS journals actually in the subscription portfolio, making up 75%. And that brings us to the second challenges we are facing, that is publication culture and financial support for HSS journals. And I'm saying challenges because it differs quite a lot from STM. So within our humanities journals, we have a diverse set of publication formats. We don't only publish original research, we publish interviews, we publish reviews, and book reviews actually make up almost 50% of the output we have in our humanities journals. So, and these book reviews are just not eligible for funding in the APC model, something you need to think about when you're transitioning the humanities journals. And I think you need to find solutions for this kind of formats as well, which are so fundamental for humanities research. And then we tried to launch a few APC journals, but we failed. And that is because there is a low acceptance of APCs in the humanities and social sciences, and we see a growth of diamond models. And then the third challenge is really about the challenges of having a global OA transformation with different speeds of transformation and different model preferences in different countries. So what do we do about these challenges? And we were looking into the options that we have to transition these 300 subscription journals. We looked into, okay, can we do hybrid to sponsored or diamond? Is that an option? And we came to the conclusion that that is only viable for a few individual journals, as the centralized lasting financial support is required. We were then looking into, okay, can we accelerate the growth of hybrid to then come to an APC model, full gold APC model? And we kind of detected this option because, as I already said, the APC culture in HSS is not really working, so it's not suitable for the bulk of our portfolio. And as I already mentioned, we were growing the transformative agreements, but our markets, our authorship and our subscription markets are just too diverse to allow for a fast and sustainable transformation. And then we looked into subscribe to open, and we really felt that this model could work if it really has a greater transformational impact if the switch to open access is successful. And what is really an important feature for us is that the model can be applied to our entire portfolio, and that one of the objectives we set ourselves, that there is no paywall to publish for the authors. And this is where we came up with a plan on how we then transition our portfolio from where we are to almost full open access in the next couple of years. And this is the forecast. So this year we flipped 9 titles. Next year we're going to flip 40 titles to subscribe to open. So what does it take to scale? And I'm start with organizational implication. And when preparing for this panel, I really thought, well, it quite takes a lot. It's not cost neutral. It's not effort neutral to transition. I already said at the beginning, it took us 2 to 3 years of internal analysis, internal strategy development, of consulting with libraries and consortia and with learned societies with what we are partnering about our transition plans. And when finally the management and the board signed off, we started the implementation. And we had the luck that the workflows and processes that we already designed them in the pilot phase. But then the work started to really get all colleagues on board. And all colleagues means literally almost everyone working at the publishing house. So editorial, publishing, sales, marketing, communications, but also operations, customer service, and also the tech departments needed to work towards the common goal. And it might be a commonplace in change management, but it's really when the winds of change blow, some build walls while others build windmills. And it is really a challenge to get everyone to build windmills instead of building walls. And if I would do something different now, I would think I would trust more in the power of repetition. So we provided a lot of training sessions to all colleagues, but I think it can't hurt to repeat once in a while what you are trying to reach, and that's what we are doing now. When we launched the plan, we got quite a lot of questions. So why are you doing that gradually over a couple of years? Why are you not doing it in one go? And the answer basically is that we decided that we only transition a journal to subscribe to open when we have the commitment of the editors and the editorial boards or the learned society to whom the journal belongs. And this typically requires multiple conversations or meetings, sometimes as many as 4 or 5, sometimes even more, because there is really a wide range of interest, of knowledge, of understanding of open access within different communities. And you can have an editor who really cares more about having a print copy of the journal than making it open access, and that's still the reality. So really working with all our external stakeholders, with the editors and editorial boards, requires time. What helps these conversations was that we had best practice from the success of the Subscribe to Open pilots, that we had journal publishers who already did the transition, and again, that we had a clear direction of travel. And again, if I would do something different, I think I would think about doing virtual meetings for editors to kick off the transformation conversations centrally, instead of making them one-to-one in individual journal conversations. So I come to the third part. What does it take to scale? How to make non-APC models sustainable? And again, when preparing for the panel, I was thinking about this. And I think one of the difficulties, one of the barriers really is that there is no consensus out there in here, possibly, on how to move OA forward. And these are just a few headlines, some snapshots to illustrate this. When I think about the current discussions, I feel that opposites quite dominate. So it's often an either-or thinking, an either-or mentality. So it's either APC or diamond. It's either green or gold. And I personally think that integrating perspectives might help to advance open access more quickly. So instead of thinking, making OA work for my faculty, or making OA work for a journal or a subject area, maybe it's both. Making OA work for your faculty, and at the same time making OA work for your journal and your portfolio. And to make this a little bit more, well, I was talking about this, sorry. And to make this a bit more concrete, I brought this high-level overview of the current support structure of our 21 Subscribe to Open journals. Revenue for these journals come to almost 30% from our institutional agreements. And you remember from the beginning of my presentation that we were able to build these institutional OA agreements quite successfully. And with the move to Subscribe to Open, we have been adopting the model to build in support for Subscribe to Open. And that means that for the libraries that have a deal with us, nothing really changes. They have access to our entire journal portfolio, and the faculty has unlimited publishing rights, even, and this is important, even if the Subscribe to Open offer fails. So we built in a OA guarantee. And it's important to note that one of the important features of Subscribe to Open is its conditionality character. The fact that the Subscribe to Open offer can fail if not enough subscribers continue their subscription. And the potential move back behind the paywall is a sustainability mechanism. However, it is equally important to think in what benefits do you offer to those institutions who support you. And just mentioned, for the ones who have institutional OA agreement with us, they get an OA guarantee. And you might wonder, what about the rest of the 70% of the subscribers? So that varies according to the journals. As I already mentioned, we have quite a substantial part of print subscribers, especially for our HSS portfolio. So there we consider print to be their benefit, the benefits that subscribers want. And for online, we are providing complementary, for online subscribers, we are providing at the moment complementary access to the back files, and we will need to see whether that benefit is sufficient in the long run. When you think about long-term sustainability, I think you need to think about value in a non-APC world. And I think the non-APC world has one advantage in comparison to the APC world. In an APC world, you only value publishing, with the negative effects that that can have. In a non-APC world, you can and you have to build on two elements. One is reading and usage, and one is publishing. A journal to be successful in a non-APC world in the long run needs to have readers who really value the content that they are reading, and you need to have authors who want to publish in the journal. And I think when you think about your models, it's really crucial to think about how you can factor in these two core values and possibly others which are in the box there. And I'm going to stop my presentation with one final remark about the Subscribe to Open community of practice. Because even so, Subscribe to Open has received a lot of attention in the past. It's crucial for the model that we further adopt it among publishers and that it further gains acceptance among libraries and funders. And here, the Subscribe to Open community of practice really plays a pivotal role. And it's really fantastic to see how publishers, librarians, and funders are getting together, are working together on drive Subscribe to Open forward. Thank you.
Oh, it's me. First test. Oh. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being here and for your attention to this panel, which I'm delighted to be a part of. I'm here today to talk about how the institutional library has a significant role to play in advancing a brand of open access that emphasizes access to both published scholarly research and the means of publishing that research. In this way, Diamond OA leads with equity, and aligns better with many humanities and social science publishing cultures and funding models. But what does it take to achieve sustainable Diamond open access publications within a library publishing environment? I may have more questions than answers. Okay, so just to provide some context for my presentation today, as Heather mentioned, I'm the director of the Scholarship Publishing Program at the California Digital Library, which is the system-wide library of the University of California. The program provides Diamond open access journal publishing services to the 10 University of California campuses via a platform that aggregates, oh my God. Aggregates, that's the whole point of what we do. These publications under UCZ scholarship imprint while also supporting the unique identities of the campuses and the publications affiliated with them, effectively creating a statewide hub of Diamond open access journal publishing with a list of over 90 journals. Diamond OA journals. eScholarship celebrated its 20th anniversary recently, a milestone that is both a testament to UC's long-standing commitment to library publishing and also a marker of the relative newness of this endeavor within the larger history of scholarly publishing. Despite our relative youth, though, we believe we have an important role to play within scholarly communication. We feel strongly that as the library publisher for the University of California, we have a great deal to offer our institution, particularly with regard to realizing the promise of equity in open access. Our publications are scholar-led and aligned with the academic values of the university. Unlike commercial publishers whose business models are largely based on revenue, we specifically try to develop our programs with an eye to equity. Where are the opportunities to support new subfields or new perspectives or share information with new audiences? Our publications often traverse standard disciplinary boundaries, explore novel publishing models, support underrepresented voices within the scholarly record, and reach communities and/or professionals in applied fields beyond academia. The journals pictured here represent 3 publications, 2 recent, 1 long-standing, that embody these values. The first, Elan, is the flagship publication of the Belosin Center for Philippine Studies at the Department of Asian American Studies at the University of California, Davis, a new eScholarship journal. Its mission is to provide an online forum for publishing original and refereed essays, artwork, and reviews that engage with the lived experiences of Filipinx Americans within diasporic studies. The next journal, American Indian Culture and Research Journal, recently flipped to open access in eScholarship following a 50-year history of publishing commercially within a subscription model. The editor-in-chief of the journal and professor of world arts and cultures at UCLA describes this process as indigenizing the journal. That is, making sure that the materials that we're publishing, which have historically in other scholarly journals been written about Native people, are by, for, and with Native people. It makes sense that open access is the mode that we engage in order to make sure that the materials about Native communities are actually available to those same communities. And finally, California Agriculture, which has been publishing with eScholarship for 2 decades, continuously publishing since 1946, with a flip to open access via eScholarship in 2002, this journal aims to engage a broad readership in topics related to agricultural and climate challenges, with content for farmers and researchers, as well as agricultural extension programs throughout the state of California. So we believe we're doing something fundamentally important here, serving fields and communities that are significantly underserved by the commercial publishing industry, not because of the quality or relevance of their research, but because their topics or their audiences or their goals or their funding models don't fit neatly into a profit-driven publishing ecosystem. Core to the question of sustainability is, of course, infrastructure. As a longstanding member of the library publishing community and a principal in the Next Gen Library Publishing Project, CDL believes our journals and the journals of our peer publishers need high quality, low cost, modern open infrastructure that offers the same, perhaps even better tools and features available to commercial publishers for maximizing capacity, optimizing discovery, and driving engagement with the research we publish. But unlike commercial publishers, we believe that this infrastructure should be embedded in a community-led, values-driven approach to scholarly communication, i.e. open infrastructure. And as with any Diamond OA publisher, one of our core values is that our authors should have no required fees levied upon them or their institution to publish in eScholarship journals. It is a distinct model from the University of California's transformative agreements approach to open access, which relies on the library's payment of APCs on behalf of the faculty to fund open access in commercial journals. Not all scholars are affiliated with institutions that can pay those fees on their behalf, and even fewer authors are in a position to pay those fees themselves. That said, we also recognize that Diamond OA faces its own equity challenges. I have a lot of jet lag and a lot of caffeine, so apologies for any errors I make here. Equity challenges specifically tied to the problem of sustainability. Most fundamentally, we have a bad habit, in the US at least, of referring to the work of Diamond OA journal publishing as a labor of love. Many eScholarship journals are of this ilk, I will admit, journals run by volunteer staff with no sustaining resources beyond their commitment to the work. We default to this model because it enables editors to spin up journals in the absence of dedicated funding. The research must come to light, let's fight the good fight, etc. We have to stop doing this. There are real costs in terms of human labor associated with this open access model, just as there are with other open access models. When we bury the costs of Diamond OA in volunteerism driven by a sense of mission, however noble that may feel, we give ourselves and others permission to under-resource these vital efforts in terms of staffing, infrastructure, and sustainable funding. The question I struggle with is, how can we solve these problems while still keeping equity at the center of what Diamond OA is and can be? It's no small challenge, but first and foremost, we must make the labor of running a Diamond Open Access journal known. There is no shame in acknowledging that the open circulation of knowledge in a global information network takes significant work. Knowledge is not sullied by the labor involved in distributing it. Rather, that labor signifies and validates the importance of ensuring the open and fair distribution of information worldwide. A labor of love is, by definition, an expression of ardor via work that is itself recompense enough. I'm going to go out on a limb here and insist that this is not sustainable. Instead, it results in journals that struggle to persist when their devoted founders step away, and journal editors who burn out because of the lack of resources supporting their work. We have an obligation to work with our journals to ensure that they are on a path to a sustainable publishing future with a budget, a staffing model, and a transition plan that is both feasible and humane. There is no shame in that. The power of the transformative agreement licensing model with commercial publishers is that it streamlines investment in open access. For those institutions that have significant licensing budgets, it's often just a matter of redirecting the funds they spend with the big publishers from one purpose, subscriptions, to another, APCs. Diamond OA, on the other hand, is in the uncomfortable position of having no easy path to investment, especially in the United States. Libraries are asked to invest in individual Diamond open access initiatives as they emerge, as they come to the table to ask for funding, a logistically difficult proposition. Library budgets are not agile. Libraries are good at writing big checks to big vendors. We need alternative mechanisms for facilitating sustainable investment in Diamond OA. One such solution, as Christina has just described, is Subscribe to Open. Another is Lyrasis' Open Access Community Investment Program, or OACIP, the first example I have on this slide. This program, run by Charla Lair, who unfortunately couldn't be with us here today, establishes a clearinghouse of information about participating Diamond OA journals and both solicits from and facilitates investment in those journals by institutions, departments, and other stakeholders. Lyrasis works with the journals to establish publishing profiles, budgets, funding goals, et cetera, and then manages the money coming in from the investors and going out to the journals. While the project is only in its beginnings, it has already generated a lot of interest, and I can say with 2 journals in the program, American Indian Culture and Research Journal and Combinatorial Theory for eScholarship, in both cases for us, it enabled a soft landing for journals flipping from a commercial publisher to the eScholarship program. The question is, how do we scale this kind of model? It works well so far for 20+ journals. What would it look like to provide a similar funding opportunity for libraries that encompassed, say, 1,000 institutionally or independently published Diamond OA journals? Another sustainability approach for eScholarship journals, perhaps the most common one, is the departmental sponsorship model. In this case, a department, I'm using the UCLA Asian American Studies Center as an example, funds a full or part-time employee who is working on the journal specifically, in our case, AAPI Nexus, associated with that department, often as the journal manager. This local sponsorship model can be quite sustainable over time as long as there is a commitment to ongoing funding from the departmental chair or the dean of the division. It also embeds the journal's long-term health in its own academic institution, another approach that empowers universities to stop outsourcing the distribution of academic research to for-profit companies. But there are risks. The departmental budget gets cut, a new dean arrives, the journal's affiliation with the department weakens over time. The last model that I'll discuss today actually sounds a little bit like what Christina was saying about this amalgamation approach. This model, used by Glossa Psycholinguistics and derived from the original Glossa journal, involves an initial query to authors in the conditional acceptance letter that goes out when only minor revisions are required to the manuscript. After discussing style sheets, XML, and ORCIDs, the editor-in-chief makes the following pitch, and this is a quote. Finally, now that your paper is conditionally accepted, I would like to bring up the matter of the voluntary author contributions, our VAC. As you know, we are a fair open access journal, which means that authors publishing in Glossa Psycholinguistics face no financial obligation for the publication of their article. However, if you have access to funds earmarked for author processing charges via a research grant or through your institution, we ask you to pay the $500 US VAC for publishing in the journal. If you do not have access to such personal funds, please consult your institutional library or department and confirm that you don't have access to those grants. The VAC helps cover publication costs and ensure that all of the content is fully open access, while also ensuring that our operations remain sustainable. After the final revisions are complete, if the author has indicated a willingness or ability to pay the VAC, they receive the following message from the editor-in-chief. At this juncture, I am writing because you have indicated that you are able to support Glossa Psycholinguistics through the voluntary author processing charge, and that we should be in contact with you about this. We're very grateful for your support. By supporting us in this way, you are supporting our open access mission and making it possible for other scholars to publish and read Glossa Psycholinguistics free of charge. As a reminder, authors publishing in Glossa Psycholinguistics face no financial obligation for the publication of their article. The VAC helps to cover publication costs and ensure that all of the content is fully open access while also ensuring that our operations remain sustainable. I'm attaching an invoice, etc. These VACs are managed within a foundation established for that purpose and offset the typesetting fees that are common in linguistics publications. To the delight of the editor-in-chief, who just reported this to me, 19 out of 19 recent authors have contributed the VAC to the journal. Importantly, the discussion about contributing a VAC only arises when the author's manuscript has been accepted, and the author may change their mind about paying the fee at any juncture. One nice feature of this fee, which is voluntary, is that no one is obligated to suffer the indignity of requesting a waiver to avoid a required fee. But still, individuals are being asked to contribute, and voluntary or not, that may not be the clearest path to sustainability. Finally, I'll close by saying I am not a big fan of the color wheel of open access, gold, green, diamond. The categories tend to be vague, and the reality of who pays for what is often obscured. Diamonds themselves often carry their own dark truths about the pillaging of valuable resources from under-resourced nations around the world. In that way, diamonds are a terrible metaphor for diamond open access journals, which tend to flourish in the global south and can offer an equitable alternative to the well-funded Western publishing juggernaut. But as the hardest naturally occurring substance on earth, diamonds are also an excellent metaphor for these gritty journals, forged under the pressure of limited resources, working to shine in a competitive, often hostile commercial marketplace. Let's work together to find new ways for them to shine. Thank you. Oh, I left it on the...
Thanks.
Sorry.
I think, Catherine, you finished off with me.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, is it possible to get the full slide? There's bits of the slide that's cut off.
Did it not show my diamonds? It did never show the diamond picture. That's weird. Maybe something went wrong with the slides at that point. Yeah, I don't know.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, colleagues. At the outset, I would like to thank Sarah and the rest of the organizing team for the invitation to share an African perspective. Sorry, my African perspective because of what Joy was saying about South Africa on the theme. The theme of the session is Show Me the Money. There are two areas of focus in terms of this theme. One is finance, and two is social justice. It would seem to me that there is an assumption. There is an assumption that there is money, maybe not enough, but significant enough to reallocate to make scholarship more accessible. However, when one looks at this theme through an African lens, there are no finances to reallocate. In addressing this focus from an African perspective, one needs to substitute. We need to substitute finance with process. The proposed reimagination of the financial model, in my opinion, upholds the current exclusionary publishing ecosystem where systemic biases go uncontested. There are many who suggest that Africa contributes around 1%, and maybe less, of the world's knowledge production. This is a profound contention, and it is my assertion that a significant contributor to this low research production is the inherent bias located in the current publishing ecosystem. Let's look at the concept of social justice. There is a divergence in the definition of social justice, which within an open access paradigm. For some, it is interpreted as an enabler to advance open access. But for others like myself, we see it as a disruptor. It is a disruptor to the current publishing ecosystem. And for this presentation, I will present it as a disruptor. This presentation is not about showing you the money. It is about sharing the principles of Ubuntuism. It is about sharing communitarism, which hopefully will guide Africa to a path for an increase in the visibility, discoverability, and accessibility of its scholarship. The interventions are not in dollars or euros. It is about collectively picking up the grain. The lack of funding demands a higher level of innovation and creativity, and not a mere rearrangement of the deck chairs. The insertion of social justice principles serve as a spark for the deconstruction and then the reconstruction process. Even though I am an open access advocate, I'd like to think so, I have stated ad nauseum that the open access movement has betrayed Africa. The transference of the financial barrier from the reader to the author is catastrophic, as the APCs makes it near impossible to get published. The domino is greater reliance on global North research. We now have a second chance with Diamond Open Access. We need to take lessons from the Latin American experience. I hope I wasn't that disruptive. Fine? Good. Yeah. I will define Diamond Open Access through a Global South lens and bring to the fore the need for respect for a regional definition of a Diamond Open Access process that addresses regional imperatives. Diamond is not about finance. It is more about principles and processes. It's about equity and inclusivity. So I think there's a, but I'm going to continue, okay? What I'm talking about and what's reflected there is okay. I will just now give you some kind of contextual. I'm going to go back. There seemed to be a slide got lost in transition, so I apologize for that. Right. I'm coming back to put into context the whole concept of Diamond Open Access. And for me, the current rule of thumb of definition of Diamond Open Access is a publishing model where scholarship is made freely accessible to readers and free for the authors. And here I make reference to the removal of publication fees. When engaging with the concept from an African perspective, there are three significant drivers that converge to provide a meaningful Diamond Open Access movement that is significantly flexible to accommodate regional imperatives. Those three drivers are: one, social justice; two, non-commercialization; and three is equity and inclusivity. In terms of social justice for Africa, Diamond Open Access must be underpinned. It has to be underpinned by social justice principles. For me, social justice principles function, as I've indicated, to deconstruct. We have to deconstruct the historical barriers and will help to reconstruct a publishing ecosystem that advances decolonization and demarginalization. A de-northernized publishing ecosystem will address systemic biases such as geographic bias, language bias, editorial bias, and even peer review bias. Non-commercialization is the second driver. Diamond Open Access must explicitly denounce profit-driven motives. It is about ensuring that scholarly communication is driven by academic values rather than commercial interests. This model is seen as a way of returning. We have to return control of scholarly communication to the academy. We heard about this morning about equity and inclusivity, or equity. In this social justice, non-commercial driven Diamond Open Access model, equity comes before equality. You have to have equity first before we talk about equality. And that is represented on the graphic there. And I think Joy and I were searching the same website, okay? There has to be some level of prioritization in the distribution of resources and opportunities. We keep talking about access, but we don't talk about contribution. Based on needs and circumstances before the sameness in treatment. True equality can only be achieved when we have differing starting points, barriers, and challenges that have to be leveled out. By leveling out the playing field, the gap between the haves and the have-nots, I hope, is closed, giving greater meaning and value to equality. Ubuntu is drawn from a Southern African philosophy emphasizing community, mutual care, and shared humanity. When this philosophy is applied to Diamond, when applied to Diamond Open Access Publishing, the importance of collective responsibility, communal support, and equitable access to knowledge creation and dissemination becomes obvious. An Ubuntuized Diamond publishing ecosystem supports three areas. One, is community-driven publishing. Ubuntu values community-driven efforts, which aligns with Diamond Open Access emphasis on academic communities, libraries, and scholarly societies collectively managing the publishing process. This approach avoids commercial interests and ensures that the focus remains on the shared benefit of knowledge dissemination. In terms of equity and inclusion, Ubuntu promotes the idea, I am because we are, meaning individuals thrive when the community thrives. This ties into Diamond Open Access goal of equitable access to publishing and research dissemination, ensuring that scholars from all regions and backgrounds can contribute and benefit from global knowledge economy without financial barriers. The third concept is we talk about collaborative knowledge creation. Ubuntu speaks to collaboration and interconnectedness, which resonates with the collaborative nature of Diamond Open Access, where institutions, scholars, and editors work together to create and distribute knowledge freely. The emphasis is on collective ownership of knowledge rather than privatization or commodification. In practice, an Ubuntu approach to Diamond would focus on building a global scholarly infrastructure that is open, community-led, and focused on fostering an inclusive and collaborative academic environment. This cultivates partnerships that supports underrepresented voices in academia and a commitment to making the publishing process as open and as accessible as possible. The philosophy of Ubuntu, with its focus on collaboration, equity, and shared benefit, deeply aligns with the values of Diamond Open Access. An Ubuntuized Diamond Open Access movement seeks to create a fair and open environment for knowledge sharing, where barriers are removed and all voices have the opportunity to contribute and thrive. I'm going to now attempt to show you the principle and process and not the money. The University of Cape Town developed what we've called the African Platform for Open Scholarship, using the tenant model to advance Diamond Open Access. This infrastructure supports the Diamond Open Access process, enhancing the visibility and accessibility of African scholarship. In this model, participating institutions share a common platform, but retain their identity. If you remember what Joy had said this morning, we don't want handouts. We want to develop our own. Each institution takes ownership of its segment, and the look and feel of the journals and books reflect that of the institution's brand. And we try to facilitate the enhancing of the institution's prestige. It's about the academic and the institution. The transposition of finance in support of Ubuntuism and communitarism responds to the underpinning philosophical purpose of open access. The success of Diamond Open Access Publishing at UCT is testimony of opening the highway for the accelerated growth of African scholarship. To illustrate the success of Diamond Open Access, we have taken 10 of the 26 books published by UCT libraries, and we analyzed them. These 10 books showed exponential increase in downloads, demonstrating increased visibility and accessibility. Two of the most downloaded books were Marketing to South African Consumers. Note this, these are South African texts, and Constitutional Law for Students. The marketing textbook was downloaded 73,514 times in 1 year. And the Constitutional Law textbook was downloaded 71,928 times in the same year. Since its publication, here I'm making reference to the Constitutional Law textbook, since its publication in March 2020, the book has been downloaded 245,000 times from more than 160 countries across the world.
Reggie, 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Injury time for the glass.
Yes, and the fact that my slides were all over the show,
Yeah,
but I will
Granted.
very quickly, those are the two journals that I've brought to showcase. And you could see how well downloaded they are across the world. Okay. Just as open access was hijacked by the principal intervention of APCs, there is a dire need for the Diamond Open Access movement to be guarded against going down the same rabbit hole as the open access movement. We need to respect that finance is not the primary barrier for Africa, and a context-defined Diamond Open Access will respond positively to the commitments underpinned in the Bethesda Declaration. Africa cannot show you the money, but we can show you the application of principles and processes for inclusion. Ubuntuism and communityism will collectively aid in picking up the grain in supporting the improved visibility, accessibility, and discoverability of African scholarship. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And I realize we're getting tight for time, but we had prepared a couple of questions. So I hope you'll humor us for just a bit. I think that that really meshed well with the presentations tomorrow, and I think those themes will be carried about through the rest of the conference. I want to ask Christina to tell us just a little bit about what they found problematic with the term pilot when they were communicating about their subscribe to open transition.
So what did it make difficult to introduce the pilot in the first stage? I think at that time when we were thinking about introducing subscribe to open for first one journal and then a couple of journals, I think it was still a relatively young model, and it still is. And when I first learned about it, I thought, well, it's charmingly easy, but yet not so easy to explain. And I think, well, I learned a lot in explaining the model, and I think the conditionality character that it has is something which you need to convince your editors about, right? It's not that they have an OA guarantee. They can't promise all of the authors that the subscribe to open offer will succeed. But I think it's just about, okay, if it succeeds, you have more than you have now, right? And it's our job to make it succeed. And I said, well, the conditionality character is part of the model, and we might apply the paywall at some point. I'm sure we will. We need to for some journals. But it's really about our job in doing this. So I think it's really about learning how to talk about the conditionality character of Subscribe to Open to editors and editorial boards. And we have, in the case that the offer fails, a green liberal open access policy in place. So again, maybe it's not just about gold or green, but it's about both. And just saying, okay, if that works and we are committed to make it work, then you really have more than you currently have. And I think that really helped to really think about how you communicate about this conditionality character to both editors as well as internally. And as well as with librarians, because when we first introduced that to our institutional open access agreement in Germany, they were really in the deal thinking, and that was really an adventure saying, okay, let's look, we are doing a classical publish and read deal, but we are introducing the Subscribe to Open component, and are you willing to support us in this? And the first initial reaction was like, okay, if you think so. We can try, but you know the logic in these kind of some consortium deals were really bound in Germany to the deals, and to break that also was challenging in the pilot program.
I'm glad you mentioned library. It's a good transition to Catherine because she's wearing a couple hats here. As libraries move into a more complicated, perhaps budgeting situation where they have to support multiple models as well as infrastructure, what kind of suggestions might you give to the librarians in our midst?
Well, I would say that I'm not sure I'm full of solutions here. I think that one of the things that I'm very mindful of is that transformative agreements or read and publish agreements are generally not cost-cutting measures. At best, they stabilize the budget. And so it doesn't free up a lot of money within those budgets unless there's an appetite for cutting relationships with publishers, cutting subscriptions, especially given that library budgets are flat at best, which means they are falling behind all the time. So I think that the Subscribe to Open model is an interesting one if you're thinking in terms of library budget investment, because it, like the transformative agreements, converts a payment that's already in place for another purpose. And so it avoids some of the pitfalls and the friction that comes up around Diamond OA, sadly. But it only works in a setting in which something was previously a subscription-based model, because there are already those paths to payment. So it does not solve the Diamond OA challenge as it's manifested in other kinds of models.
And we have 1 minute. I'd like to ask Reggie to please remind people about the Global Diamond Summit that's happening later this year, because I know it's taking a lot of your time.
No, thank you very much. Yes, from the 8th of December to the 14th of December would be the second Global Summit on Diamond Open Access. It basically has 3 arms to it. The one arm is to ensure that those practicing librarians who want to move into this particular field are taught scholarly communication. So there will be one arm where we would look at mainstreaming scholarly communication in LI's curriculum. The second stream is the Open Science in the South Conference. This is a conference that is being hosted by the French IRD and South Africa's NRF. And then you have the main conference. Basically, we have an oversight group that has put together a very sound and I think very enriching program to look at Diamond. And I think there will be a lot of focus on research assessment and understanding the whole concept of social justice within a Diamond paradigm.
Thank you. Now, before I thank our panelists, I'm going to remind you it's a transition and not a break. And if you're speedy, you can make a bio break, but please come back because we need to finish strong today with our keynote. Thanks again to our panelists. Thank you for your kind attention, and hopefully we can get some maintenance or staff up here to clean up this damage that happened. Thank you.
Thank you.